So you have a motion on the post office, essentially the future of the post office. What are your concerns there?
My concerns, Catherine, are that we've got the post office and it seems to be heading in a negative direction. And I think it needs some really clear thinking about the future of the post office. So really to repurpose it for the 21st century. There's a lot of challenges that the post office are facing at the moment, with declining mail volumes, financial pressures, competition from low-cost operators. They've got a pensions issue. And there's a view that maybe the post office has had its day from some political quarters, and that actually it should be downsized and cost cut into a more sustainable model. I don't share that view. I think the post office is an integral part of the island, and I think it's a fantastic asset. And I'm really concerned that we don't lose that, that we don't sleepwalk into a problem. And obviously the board are working on their plans, but I actually don't think the board on its own can optimise the situation. I think it needs a wider debate about what the post office, what its attributes are, what it has the potential to do, and how that fits into wider public service delivery.
Wouldn't it be better to let the post office itself roll out its strategy to see where they get to before the politicians step in?
Well, the politicians are already in, because the post office is statutory board. It's got a chair, Julie Edge.
But Tynwald, rather than the politicians who are put in that position. If Tynwald comes in with a motion, that's a different animal than the chair of the post office talking to, say, the Council of Ministers or other areas of government.
It is, but I think that this is a big issue, and I think we're in danger of sleepwalking into a problem, and that I think the outworking of this current situation will be continued attrition in terms of the post office, and I think if we're not careful, we're going to see continued job losses, branch closures, and effectively what has the potential to be a really powerful part of a modernised government actually becoming more and more emaciated over time. And you'll note actually some of the nuances around the motion. It actually calls on the Council of Ministers to report back to Tynwald. So I'm very much putting the ball in the court of Comyn, and I would anticipate them working with the board and the chair of Isle of Man Post Office to actually shape up that plan. But I don't think, left to their own devices, that the board will be capable of getting to the optimal outcome. And that's not a criticism of the board. I think it's just that they're operating one level down. We need to see a slightly bigger picture here, which is that the post office has some incredible attributes. It's a very trusted brand. It's got a geographical reach right across the island. It's got a people resource. I don't know the exact numbers, but I believe it's about 300. It's got a physical presence in every town and most of the major villages on the island. And I think with the right thought process around that potentially has a transformational opportunity for public service, because we're seeing obviously services becoming more centralised for efficiency. We're seeing a greater use of the digital platform, which is great, but actually that doesn't reach every member of society, and we need to be careful to make sure that we don't leave people behind in that process. So what I'm looking for is some fresh thinking about what the post office could be for in the future, and to do that you've got to start by recognising what it actually is. So it's got a great logistics capability, it's got a technology platform, it's got a good people resource base, and fundamentally it has the ability to get things done right across the island. And I think it would be a poor outcome if we lost that. And really, what I want to do is prompt that sort of dialogue and get the issue out on the table.
Now you're asking Tynwald basically to endorse the post office going into future years, to say that the Isle of Man, that Tynwald believes that the Isle of Man Post Office has a significant role to play in the future delivery of enhanced public services in the Isle of Man. Mm-hmm. Now, we know that the traditional services that the post office has offered are no longer in demand, not as much as they once were. Could it be time for more radical thinking? You say that they have good people resources. They can be transferred elsewhere. Is it time to look at a more fundamental change, possibly not having a post office since its traditional purpose, with the changes in communications, doesn't really exist to the same extent anymore?
Well, I think it does need some fundamental thinking. I actually think that the better approach would actually be to devolve more services into the post office, and actually become the public face of large elements of government, because it's got a very trusted brand, it's got the heritage, it's got people who are out there all over the island, who have relationships with people in our towns and villages that can be used to deliver more. So you talk about radical thinking. For example, post office could effectively be a call and check service, for example, on people who are isolated in their own homes. It could be a facility in each town and village whereby people could connect into government services. It could, for example, be, given the fact that you've got post office drivers going across the length and breadth of the island's roads, could there be the first line support, for example, for reporting road issues, potholes, signage, etc. None of these are definitive, requirements, but it's just to prompt the debate, and I think we need to have that higher level discussion about some of these opportunities, because clearly staying as we are, there's going to be quite a poor outcome, I think, for the post office, and I think that would be a missed opportunity for the island.
Also on the order paper, there is a statement by the chairman of the post office. Is this motion premature? Should you not wait to see what the chairman's got to say? It will come before your motion on the order paper, but that's not a lot of time to actually digest what's been said.
I think fundamentally, I don't think it's premature, because if we leave it now, there's 3 more months before Tynwald sits again. I think the issues around the post office are live issues, and the statement from the chairman of the post office, I believe, will be very much about what the board is doing to move things forward, and about their plans and their strategy. I stick to my statement earlier that I think that this needs a wider discussion. This can't just be left to the board of the post office, because they're operating within existing parameters, and I think we need to challenge some of those parameters as part of this debate.
Now, are you essentially asking Tynwald to support government doing more within this motion and using the post office as a vehicle to do that at a time when it's striving to do possibly less, or certainly things more efficiently?
I think this is part of government doing things more efficiently, and I think it's about recognising the capability that you've actually got, and actually using it. And clearly, if services are delivered through the post office, then that changes how they're delivered through central government or through local authorities, for instance. So I think it's about actually what is the best impact for the people of the Isle of Man. How do they get the services that they need, and then the delivery mechanism behind that will follow.
Now, within this motion, you say you put the ball back in the court of the Council of Ministers. Why not a select committee to look into it independently? I mean, Comyn will already have a notion of what it sees the future of the post office as. Wouldn't it be better to have 3 MHKs independently looking at it, or 3 MLCs looking at it with fresh eyes?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I've thought quite long and hard about this motion and the way it's been put together. And what I felt was that clearly the board has been exercised with this issue. You talked about the statement coming out and the 5-year strategy. They've been thinking about this and working on their plans within the parameters in which they operate. And I think it would be a complete waste if we didn't build on that and actually start from the work that's already been done. And by putting the ball in Comyn's court, that will then happen. If we went into a Tynwald select committee, effectively starting from scratch again, yes, the board may be invited in to present their thinking. But I just felt that to get the best possible results in the shortest possible time, it was better to ask Comyn to step up.
Is this essentially a motion which aims to save the post office at all costs?
No, you can't. We can't have a at all costs attitude in the environment that we're in. What this motion is about is to say, let's really understand the value that the post office can bring. Okay, so it's about what not just what it does now, but the potential that it has to do things and deliver services for the people of the Isle of Man in the future. I think that it has potentially a lot of value to add to the Isle of Man. And what I don't want to do is for us to sleepwalk into a scenario where the Isle of Man post office just continues to drift and deteriorate, and we end up with something that actually has an inevitable conclusion around it.